the great outsider, showed up in Washington, D.C. after having won the 2016 elections and said, I'm the duly elected president of the United States. I decide both domestic and foreign policy, because that's how a constitutional republic is supposed to work, right? All power flows from the people to their duly elected representatives, who they've entrusted to be the stewards of the power and money given to them to actually form a government that actually benefits and promotes the interests of the American people. That's really a rough sketch of a constitutional republic. Well, the problem was the people in D.C. said, yeah, we don't think so. That's absurd. That's not how D.C. operates, hasn't operated that way for decades. In fact, it's an administrative state where these powerful unelected bureaucrats, we're the ones that decide. We're the ones that actually decide how D.C. operates, how this government works. And so you're a threat to our status quo. You're an existential threat. And that's what it was all about. They were trying to take out Donald J. Trump because they viewed him as an existential threat to the administrative state and the managerial class, for someone who's saying, I think we're a constitutional republic, when in fact, I argue in the book, Carl, I don't think we've actually been truly a constitutional republic for years. And in reality, we're an administrative state. And this is the struggle that you're seeing taking place right now. An administrative state that's been around for just over 100 years. The premise being, from Woodrow Wilson, Theodore Roosevelt, and the early progressives, we will create a massive administrative state filled with unelected bureaucrats, a managerial class, who will be separated from the accountability of elected politics, who will then, through the power of applied science, will govern this country. Truly, that's what they wanted. They will govern this country and lead to greater progress and lead the American people to, I'm not kidding, the apotheosis of mankind, a elevated status for human beings, all through the power of the state. And I talk about Georg Hegel, Prussian philosopher, and his influence, in which he said, the state is the march of God on earth. The state is a living organism. Therefore, through that thinking, the state is salvation. And so progressive statists truly believe that salvation comes through the state. The state is a living organism through which all is subsumed. Corporations, individuals rights, and anything that is deemed beneficial to the state and to progress and to salvation is then given back from the state to the people, to the corporations. That's how you end up in 2016, 2017, and beyond, with very powerful unelected bureaucrats separated from political accountability, saying, we're the ones that decide. That's what progressives always wanted. And Donald J. Trump sitting there going, that's not a constitutional republic. That's not how it's supposed to work. And so what happened, and I think this is, again, it's the genesis for this book, and I'm hoping that the American people who have sensed something's wrong, I hope to put a finer point on it with American Leviathan. You're seeing two very different competing governing philosophies. They will never mix. They are like oil and water, a constitutional republic versus an administrative state. And that's the real struggle, I think, that's taking place right now in D.C. And I would argue, Carl, the central issue in the 2024 elections is the administrative state. If Donald J. Trump wins, him deconstructing it, devolving it, destroying it, to actually return us back to a constitutional republic.
Yeah, listen, there's no doubt about it. And I do believe that the left used the COVID pandemic and the lockdowns to honestly just reverse everything that he had accomplished, quite frankly, with deregulation and all that kind of stuff. So I do believe, Lord willing, he gets back in. We've got to put in some serious work. I love the fact, Ned, that you mentioned. I think too many conservatives want to be able to get along with the left. I don't think there's time for that. I just think right now we got to win. We got to win.
In the final chapter, in which I lay out solutions, I also make a very, very point on this. Do we get along with the left? The only way we return back to normal in this country is to force the un-American left into unconditional surrender by beating them at the ballot box and saying we're going to eradicate this entire governing philosophy that has nothing to do with how we were founded, who we are as a people. But, you know, the thing that I also make clear in this book, because I don't think a lot of people understand how much progressives hated the Constitution, hated the republic that grew out of that Constitution. But the whole point of the progressive statist movement was to annihilate the political and moral authority of the U.S. Constitution. And people are going to go, wait a minute, that's kind of a shocking statement that somehow Woodrow Wilson and Theodore Roosevelt and all these people that have kind of been deified by certain folks actually wanted to undermine the political and moral authority of the U.S. Constitution. 100%. They hated the Constitution, Carl. They hated the original intent of the founders. They hated the machinery of the Republic. And the point I want to make here is this. Progressive statists hated the Constitution because of the separation of powers. They felt that the separation of powers was a bug, not a feature. They felt that separation of powers, the diffusion of power between the legislative, executive, and judicial branches actually slowed progress. Therefore, what they had to do was destroy the separation of powers, consolidate power into one entity, the administrative state, the executive, legislative, and judicial, to then give these bureaucrats consolidated power. And so when I say it's the birth of the administrative state and progressive authoritarianism, guess what happens when you consolidate power, Carl, in the hands of relatively few? And people resist. And people say, we don't think you actually have the right ideas. It becomes authoritarian, in which they say, we're the ruling elite. We're the so-called educated elite. We know what's best for you, you dirty little peasants. You will either bend the knee and submit, or else there'll be consequences. And so that's where I think we're at in this country right now, where these people who believe in the administrative state, progressive authoritarianism, are really getting frustrated that the dirty little peasants like us still actually hold on to those antiquated ideas in their minds of covenants, of constitutions, of inherent natural rights, that somehow our government is a rights-based government. And actually, that's why it was formed. They deeply resent that to the point of hating it.
All right. I'm speaking to my guest, Ned Ryun. Again, he's the author of the new book, go out and get it, American Leviathan, The Birth of the Administrative State and Progressive Authoritarianism. Ned, listen, for those of you that are paying attention, please go out and get this book. I'm going to get, Ned, I haven't gotten it. I'm going to order this book, and I'm going to order a few of these books because I'm going to be handing them out. I think this is so important. I talk about this all the time. How our federal government just circumvents the will of the people. We saw it with the COVID lockdowns. We see it with the FDA. Thank God for this Chevron deference case.
Yes.
That was a great case. You talk about that. A minute and a half left. Ned, close us out here.
You know, the one thing, Carl, when you write a book, you look back and go, dang it, I wish I would have written this. And there was a part in it I didn't write, so now we're going to talk about it. The Chevron deference, the Supreme Court said, we're overturning this. I write about that in the book. The other one that I wish I had written about is the Supreme Court case that took place this summer, in which they said to the SEC, you can no longer have your administrative law tribunals. People go, what are you talking about? Now, these various departments and agencies, Carl, have their private tribunals in which their judge, jury, and quite frankly, executioner. You'd be shocked, Carl, to find out that those tribunals inside the SEC and other various departments and agencies, 90% of the time rule in favor of that various department and agency. And the Supreme Court this summer said that is deeply unconstitutional. It is a violation of the Seventh Amendment, trial by jury. We will no longer allow this to happen. But this is what's been taking place in D.C. for decades and decades and annihilating our Constitution. But more importantly, Carl, I think the progressives and their administrative state, again, as I mentioned earlier, are the greatest threat to our civil liberties of the American people and our rights because of this consolidation of power. They've annihilated that and made it the greatest threat to it.
Man, good stuff. Good stuff. Ned, I am so glad that you are out there. You guys go out and get the book, American Leviathan, The Birth of the Administrative State and Progressive Authoritarianism. It is time for us to take our power back. And for some of you to learn that we've lost our power. Ned Ryun.
That's right.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you,
Thanks, Carl. I appreciate it.